The other thing we need to clear up is parking. Just so you guys have the true picture of what we're talking about relative to parking. I'll put this in as an exhibit if that's necessary. There's the demarcation with the sawhorses to keep people from parking on the boatyard premise. It is true that the parking can be had on the rest of the town property, which belongs to all the residents of Jamestown and on the roads that run up into our residential neighborhood. That's absolutely true. But I think the intent when the original motion was passed to put the shack as it exists today in the box that it was in was that it was granted certain things because it was a non-existing or pre-existing situation with regard to parking. It didn't always provide enough spaces to service its own patrons, which we understood that and we lived with that for, as long as anybody's lived there, and that's fine. But when we added additional variances and extensions for other purposes other than the boatyard as it was, we should have looked at the parking situation. So in fact, instead of granting or providing one more space for this particular square footage building, which I think was part of the requirement, we actually took spaces away. The previous owners, they talk about all these derelict boats. I don't believe there were 14 to 15 boats in that back area where it's cordoned off now ever in the summertime. There were 4 or 5 in there, and the residents or the patrons of the boatyard, like they do at Jamestown Boatyard, would park in that area in between the boats. It's a mixed use. That was how it was used. The current owners of the boatyard were not there at that particular time, so I'm not sure they can speak to how that was used, but that's how it was used, and it also gave parking to the patrons of the boatyard. So I think we need to clear that up, and there was no mention at this parking meeting that we're talking about, because I was at that meeting, there was no mention of the fact that they didn't have to allow that. As a matter of fact, I think it was to the contrary. There was some discussion about, I'm not sure you can not allow parking on your property when you're providing a commercial business. So, again, this is not about not supporting the shack as it exists today. I think all the neighbors would want to totally coexist with that facility. We think it's a fine facility for our neighborhood as it exists today. But any expansion like what you're asking for is like, one of the people, Mr. American, said at the last time we got together on this subject, was the nose, of the camel going into the tent. And I think you need to be cognizant of that, and I hope you will. I appreciate it.
Question: What about removing the rules about cleanup and preparation?
Well, maybe
I'm sensitive. I'm sensitive. 5 relatives that are in the food business, and when you talk about cleanup and making the rules today, that half hour is until I know that from my family.
I'm sensitive to that, and
it's 1 or 2 people, right?
I believe that the evening hours would be the most problematic for the community as a whole. I think Jamestown in general, not just our community. Our community would be able to run, but I think ultimately that's just looking for further expansion. The earlier delivery hours, I could tolerate that. I could tolerate, even if they wanted to open up early to clean up in the morning a little bit, I could tolerate that.
But only a half an hour after 6 o'clock?
Well, I want to go back for what was asked for originally. What they asked for originally was as late as what they're asking for now, okay? And we had an agreement last year where we all came together and tried to put it into a situation that the neighborhood felt.
I understand that. Right. My specific question is, if it remained at 6 o'clock, do you have any problem with them extending the time they have to clean up?
Here's my problem with that. We went 2 weeks without anybody paying attention to the document that we all said we agreed to, okay? And so then the neighbors had to become the police of that situation. I don't want to do that. I just want to go mind my own business and go out on my boat, okay, just like everybody else. So if I have to police what's really open and what's clean up, I think it's going down a slippery slope. So I think you can do your cleanup in the morning as a prep time to the rest of the day. I think if you want to do that, I could consider that rather than going and extending further into the evening.
I don't think that's the way a restaurant works.
Well, they still have a half hour, so you can clean up. And, you know, it was brought to the neighbors as a lunchroom, not a restaurant.
I understand.
Okay? So,
Right.
thank you.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
You know, I'm personally familiar with the parking problems that used to exist there, because I had a vote there. But could you be more specific about how parking is a problem, of where people park? I mean, I heard the testimony, people in the summer would park throughout this, next to boats, under boats, in the yard, but they'd also park all the way up the street and down side streets. Could you comment on what the parking situation is there?
Another exhibit. And this isn't really Dutch Harbor's problem, and it isn't necessarily your problem, it's a town problem. The parking, that's a picture of the dock on a busy summer day, which is the dock that is owned by the town and leased by the boat guy. If you look at that parking configuration, there's no semblance to it. Periodically, the police have to come down and try to move cars, but that's not Dutch Harbor Boardwalk's fault. That's just the fault of the configuration of the whole thing, and the fact that there is just not enough parking, and exacerbated by the fact that parking has been taken away by the way they operate the shack. So, you know, what you see there is what you get on a busy Saturday or Sunday. It is what it is. It's a little free fall down there, and then cars go all the way up Narragansett Avenue, pretty much up to Ocean and Marine on both sides on the busy estates. Fire trucks can't take the corners on the Avenue B and Westwood. They're problematic even with no cars, so when cars are right to the corners, it's a tremendous problem. Those are one-lane roads, you know, dirt roads. So I think that, again, the expansion is something that will bring some more. One car more is already, it's a broken thing. You know, 2 cars more is just an addition to a broken thing. So I think, you know, not having control of that situation, just, it's hard to know what's going to happen when you add one more thing. And I'm not saying that that particular situation is at all the fault of the Dutch Harbor Board. It is, it's just the fact of life kind of living down there, but it didn't used to have a lunchroom or a restaurant that wants to be now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah, okay.
Someone swear the testimony must give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
State your name, please.
Joy Vieira.
Thank you.
I live on Ocean Ave myself as well. I am a resident. I can understand the concern with the parking. Also, it's a beautiful area for the dogs, so I can agree when you have to pull your dog in because of the traffic. Increasing the hours will increase traffic as well. In addition to that, I do own the Aces Pizza, so I feel that I can contribute some knowledge as far as cleanup, preparation, and delivery. I'm also speaking on behalf of some of the other owners, local business owners in town, as well as some of the managers. To address the cleanup, I know what it's like. I have high heat equipment. I have cooling equipment. I have to allow for proper cool down. I was under the original impression of the shack bringing in prepared foods. Nothing was to be made because of the size, because of what was going into the building. So when I hear delivery of bread, I was a little surprised. So that would require a little looking into as far as, you know, what is appropriate and what is up to code.
From last year, I remember they were going to make sandwiches and bring bread in, so I don't think that's a...
Well, bread, you have to cut it open.
Yeah.
You have to prepare it. The original proposal, in my understanding, was that it was all prepared foods from their everyday gourmet restaurant in Newport.
That wasn't my...
Understand that the restaurant closed down in August.